Evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting, Carver Planning Board meeting of July 11th, 2023. We will be commencing the meeting at 7:03 p.m. If we would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is a public hearing continued on the application of Beantown Home Services Incorporated, requesting a special permit and site plan review pursuant to sections 3100, 5300, 4341, and 2230C of the Carver zoning bylaw, located at lot number 5, Ricketts Pond Business Park off Spring Street in Carver, Mass. Assessors map 32, lots 1-5, lot 1-5, in the Spring Street Innovation District. The lot will be comprised of approximately 6,621 square foot light industrial building with associated driveways, parking areas, closed drainage system, septic system, and utility connections. The applicant has requested a continuance until 7/25/2023, and so the board will, the chair will accept the motion to continue the public hearing on the application of Beantown Home Services, Inc. until July 25th, 2023, 7 p.m., Room 1, Carver Town Hall.
I'll make said motion.
Motion made by Mr. Dion,
Second?
seconded by Ms. Sordillo. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Dion?
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sodillo says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. All right. Our next order of business is public hearing. Public hearing notice. On the application of Bridgestone Development Incorporated, requesting a special permit pursuant to sections 5300 and 2230C, 2230, 4341 of the Carver zoning bylaw, located at lot number 3, Ricketts Pond Business Park off Spring Street in Carver, Mass. Assessors map lot 32-1-3 in the Spring Street Innovation Zoning District. The project will consist of the construction of 2 light industrial buildings. The lot will be comprised of approximately 7,452 square foot light industrial buildings with associated driveways, parking areas, closed drainage system, septic system, and utility connections. Any person interested and wishing to be heard should appear.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bob Ferguson. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Bridgestone Development, Inc. And with me is Mike Ficini of Bridgestone, as well as Eric Shoemaker, McKenzie Engineering. Sounds like you may have had to step out for a moment.
Yeah, we got a
Technical issue? Okay. Okay. All right, so that's fine. May it please the board, this is, I think, our second trip before the board. We had an open meeting in March of this year. This is Bridgestone's application on remand with a revised application for a special permit that's set forth in the revised application plans. We believe that the revisions meet with the feedback and input that we received from the board, and are here to formally present those revised plans. We're not aware of any reason why they shouldn't be approved. We're not aware of a reason from another board in town or anything along those lines, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have. So as soon as he comes back and I see him walking down the hall, I can turn it over to Eric Shoemaker from McKenzie Engineering, who prepared the revised plans. And he can walk through the details of, the changes that have been made in response to the board's feedback. So with that, I will quiet down and turn it over to Eric. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening, planning board members. Eric Shoemaker, Mackenzie Engineering Group. Just going to summarize quickly the changes to the plan since we last met in March. So to begin, can everyone see the site layout plan over here? I can move it if not. Okay. So a proposed 6-foot-high vinyl fence was added adjacent to the rear edge of the pavement. The fence is expected to create a visual and acoustic screening from abutters to the site, as well as Ricketts Pond. As noted on the plans, that fence will be modified with the 1-foot-high wildlife gap at grade in order to allow animals to pass through the site and into the woods adjacent to Ricketts Pond. The proposed cement concrete dumpster pads were consolidated and moved to the north side of Lot 3. The dumpster pads are now completely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. This was a recommendation by the board, and we incorporated that into the site plan as well. The wall pack lighting to the rear of each building was revised to state that each light will be motion activated. The proposed propane tanks for each building were moved to be located within the side yards, and similar to the dumpster pads, these are completely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. The call out on the utility plan sheet C3 on your set was revised to specify that these propane tanks will be double walled. The proposed potable well and the associated water services to each building, as well as the maintenance path, were relocated to the north of the site. The well, the maintenance path, and the water services are now located completely outside of the 165-foot buffer zones to bordering vegetated wetlands. Moving on to the landscape plan, sheet LA1 in your set. The landscape plan was revised to add additional landscape buffers to the northern and southern side yards to further screen the development from the adjacent properties. We added 5 white pine trees to the southern side yard and 4 white pine trees to the northern side yard. The grading and drainage design shown on the grading plan, sheet C2, was revised to minimize the site grading work located within the 65-foot buffer zone to vegetated wetlands. This is specifically the elevation contours 140 to 143. I really changed how we graded the rear of the lot to minimize the disturbance in that area. And the last change to note was the limit of erosion control barrier. The compost filter tube was just revised accordingly to be located outside of that grading work. So that's a quick summary of the proposed changes. I know I was fast with that. I can answer any questions the board members may have.
The screening for the parking lot out front, I know we had discussed it. Were you planning on berming it and putting a vegetative cover on it?
I believe that was for Lot 5.
Because I know it had come into the discussions that, what's the required for this, somewhere around 20 feet?
I think this lot has the required, there's 22 parking spaces, so you need a 22-foot buffer on 3 sides of the parking area. I believe this lot has it. I know there's no front yard landscaping requirement in the Spring Street Innovation Zoning District. I do remember that comment, though, and I think that was for
Right.
Lot 5.
Well, right, because we want to screen the parking area so we would like to see it beefed up. Something a little more than a couple trees out front, because the parking lot should be screened from the street view. But other than that, I think you've done a great job moving things around and getting them to where they should have been.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a waiver on the number of parking spots?
They did request a waiver for the parking spots, I believe.
It's located in front of the principal building. We exceeded the 8 parking spaces in front of each building, so that was the waiver requested.
Right, and because you're upping to the proposed 24, we would like to see a better screen in front of that parking area.
Okay.
What was the width of the, okay, yeah. You were saying you believe the width of the parking lot screening or front screening was around 10 feet, 12 feet?
Yeah, 6.6 to the property line, another 2 or 3 feet to the back edge of the sidewalk. Then we have a 4-foot sidewalk and then a 2-foot strip from the road, so.
Yep. Well, the sidewalk as part of the roadway system was a required part of so
Yep.
it doesn't count. If that is a waiver, and we haven't heard back from Andy, you're gonna have to add it in here. And I believe that we've discussed it before, that we think you can fit a bike rack in there.
Okay.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, pretty much everything else I can talk.
How we doing that one?
Where are the wells?
Oh, could you point out the wells? Thanks, Eric.
Proposed well is right back here, it's back left of your plan, adjacent to the dumpster area, kind of hidden behind it.
And the dumpster will have a berm around it?
Correct.
Yep.
Cape Cod berm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions from the board?
Is that a test wall?
Sorry?
Is that a test wall?
I don't know that we've established a test well. We should wait for, we haven't had Andy's recommendations on this?
I think that, I'm hesitant to go from memory, but I think we were talking about no necessity for test well on lot 5.
On lot 5,
But
yeah.
I'm not clear on exactly what was on lot 3.
Yeah.
I'll review the information and put together a draft decision, and we'll make sure that we,
Right, because I think this was further down the hill and has a lot of impervious surfaces in regards to it.
If I do remember, Andy said 5 was far enough
It was
away
up-
from the
yeah.
pond. It didn't require a test well, but I thought we were doing test wells in 1, 3, 2, and 4, I believe.
Yep, I believe so.
So if that's the
One,
case,
two.
you don't have a spot there for a test well?
No, but it can certainly be a condition, and we'll work with Andy to figure out a spot.
We just want to monitor the water in there,
Yep.
because you're so close to the pond.
Of course.
Other than that, I'm all set with it.
All right. This is a public hearing, so is there anybody that wishes to speak or has any questions in regards? Seeing none. Mr. Bod, when do we think Andy will have this squared away?
well, our next meeting is the 27th?
So, yeah.
Well, let's go
25th?
14 days from today, 25th.
Is it-
25th, yeah.
25th. So I'll had a couple calls in passing with Andy today. We'll catch up during the week
All right.
and identify that and put together a draft decision for the 7:25 meeting.
Eric, if this is continued to the 25th, well, it's going to be continued to the 25th. That'd be all right? I expect you'll have enough time to get Andy's comments in, depending. If it's not, we can always push it out. This is,
Yeah, sure, it's fine with us.
okay, yeah, all right. So, the chair will accept a motion to continue the public hearing on the application of Bridgestone Development, Inc., Lot 3, Ricketts Business Pond Park, to July 25th, 2023, 7 PM, Meeting Room 1, Carver Town Hall.
I'll make that same motion.
A second.
All right, motion made by Mr. Robinson, seconded by Ms. Sordillo. Discussion? Seeing none?
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Stillo says aye.
And Cornelius Shea says aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, that's it.
You look like you have a question.
Is it, rescission plan?
Yep, that's next on the agenda, yep.
Nothing else in my binder.
Let's see what I got.
Is there-
I can give you the big one, and I'll hold on to the small one. This is a public hearing, correct, Mr. Bott? Because I have it listed under other business, but I've been reading it as if it was a
Yeah,
public
so
hearing.
a definitive subdivision plan is a hearing. A preliminary subdivision plan is not.
Right.
So we have a hearing.
I just wanted to make sure, because it was under other business. All right, this is the continued public hearing on the application of George A. McLaughlin III requesting a definitive subdivision rescission approval pursuant to the Carver subdivision control bylaw for property located at Montello Street, Green Parkway, on Assessor's Map 20, lots 20-2, 20-21, 20-14, and map 22, lots 22-3, 22-3-1, 22-3A, 22-3B, 22-3C, 22-4, 22-5A, 22-10, 22-10-1, 22-11 in Carver, Mass., in a highway, commercial, and green business park zoning district. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Susan Murphy from Dane Torpy, Larray Wieston Garner, PC in Boston, here on behalf of Route 44 Development. I believe the way things were left at the last hearing is that the only open question was regarding whether or not the public notice had gone out properly. So I will, if I may, defer to Mr. Bott, because I spoke to him, and I believe the office reviewed that question, if that's okay.
Yes, we requested the records to
Thank
be
you.
at the meeting this evening.
Yes, so there,
Can I interject just real quick? I'm looking at the agenda here, and 3 and 4, what do we got going on with that? Looks like we're looking at a definitive subdivision plan and then going into a preliminary subdivision plan for the same area?
Yes, which was brought to us prior to the definitive rescission plan, and the definitive rescission plan, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, lists specifically the subdivisions that are to be rescinded. I think the last one is
95.
95. Yeah.
So there was a couple of older subdivision plans
Right.
for these
yeah,
parcels.
I remember everything
Yep.
that was going on
Yep.
with all that, but it just, I don't know, it caught me a little strange that.
so if I can, just to make it as simple as possible, so the rescission plan wipes the slate clean. At one point, it was one piece of land before anybody ever got here.
Right.
And so, over time, people make plans for things plans get layered on top of things. One of the options available to the applicants and the boards is a rescission plan that essentially wipes the slate clean. So the rescission plan takes all the lots, all the roads, all the things that have been created by plans prior to, and creates a blank slate for the property. So that's the rescission plan, to bring it back to that one lot. The definitive plan that follows it is to create 3 lots from that blank slate.
Preliminary plan.
Thank you.
And this is part of what's called for under the urban renewal plan to bring together and create one large development lot.
Yeah, I get all that, but we have spent the last couple of meetings talking about preliminary subdivision plans, and we have not discussed one time about the recession plan, even though it's been on the agenda the entire time. So,
This is our third meeting on the rescission plan.
I think it's the second. I believe at your last hearing, we did discuss the rescission plan, and we had an engineer here from GAF
I apologize, I
Engineering.
wasn't here at the.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
Yes.
sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
so that was, it
I was
was,
out for the last meeting.
yeah, we had an engineer here from GAF who just walked the board through the plans, and it was just as Mr. Vaught explained, to just, kind of a clean slate, get rid of the old lots or the old roadways that were never built, that were on prior plans going back to 1995. And it was kind of a belt and suspenders because it was never built. It technically was rescinded anyway, but this way at the Registry of Deeds, it will be on record that that's all wiped out. So that kind of wipes the slate clean. But there was a question because some of the abutters were here related to that application for the rescission, about whether or not they had gotten proper notice. So at that time, the board said, well, why don't we wait because your staff wasn't here and just double check all that. So that's kind of a recap of what happened at your prior hearing.
Okay. And not to really beat a dead horse or anything, but I know that we had talked about there was a lot of conflict regarding the preliminary subdivision.
That's
and previous
That's our next, right?
and previous subdivisions in place. I know that we're going through a rescission on this one, but you were
We can address that one after
okay.
the rescission.
All right.
Right, Mr. Vaught.
So the answer to the question was, notice did go out. There were, for this particular development, in the way they do a butters list here, they do an abutters list for each individual piece of property. It's sort of like 12 different abutters lists. And out of those 12 different abutters lists, they print labels for each of them and they put individual labels on them and send them out. So we've confirmed that the notices did go out and cards did come back in. And I think there was one specific person who noted they didn't believe they had got a request. Michelle looked that one up and found the card from that person with a signature on it. So, the cards are back, the cards are out. And as we talked about with town council earlier, there's a lot of weird stuff in Massachusetts law and court cases and things like that. And when people don't get a notice and they come to the meeting, the law has basically said, no harm done, because the intent of the notice is to notify the abutters. So even if an abutter doesn't get a notice, but a friend tells them, they see it on Facebook or whatever, and they come to the meeting, any deficiencies in notice are resolved by the fact that the abutter came to the meeting. In this case, and I don't remember the person's name, I didn't write it down, but Michelle went back and looked at it and found the card from that address with his signature on it. So resolved and resolved both.
Right. Questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Murphy. This is a public hearing. Does anybody have any questions or comments in regards to the definitive subdivision rescission plan? Yes, please, you just have to identify yourself.
Jean Winslow, 28 Heather's Path. I would be interested in seeing the list of abutters that receive notification. And is this regarding what was the date of that letter?
Hearing notice went out for June 27th hearing date. It was published in the newspaper the 9th and the 16th. The postage itself probably went out on, according to the stamp here, June 12th from a couple of the letters that came back.
So I'd like to know if my letter is in there, because I directly abut Route 44's property, and I have never received notification. I've received one certified letter from them years ago when it was the original plan. So I don't know where the subdivision came into play, because when we were heavily involved in it was when they wanted to put their million-square-foot building. And that was when they had threatened eminent domain and all of that. So at that time, it was one building. It was not a subdivision of any sort. So regardless of whether it goes back to 95, I have lived there, and it was subdivided at that point. It was, because I've lived there since 94. And, we've gone through all the different things that were there. I've gone to everything, the septic treatment plant, when it was the chip tech back there, when it was the sand and gravel pit, anything that's gone on back there. But from that point, I've received one notification, like I said, it was years ago. So for them to change the plan, and I think anybody that had been here knew that we were heavily involved in that whole process.
We kind of have to stick to the rescission.
Well,
part
it
of
is, so I'm still waiting for
Right,
my,
yes,
this,
yeah,
it is.
absolutely.
I'm just killing time while
No,
I'm
no,
trying to
that's
find
fine.
my notification that I clearly didn't sign.
So you're on Heather's Path?
Yes. And I have the plot plan of their property, and even from the topographical map.
All right, and what was your address on Heather's Lane again?
28 Heather's Path.
So I got 4 Heather's Path. Like I said, there are 12 lists, so I'm.
No, yeah. So if a butters letters went out for each of the different properties, would that mean that they would have received multiple letters?
No, that's, and that's, like I said, this is the way that they do it in Carver. Typically, you have a parcel and it puts one letter together, but they do an abutters letter for each individual parcel.
They're just focusing on that.
I mean, is it based that their whole piece of property, because it extends from 58, basically, that whole area, and it goes back to Pleasant Street? So it carries that. So is it a subdivision that's built up that their sole piece of property is smaller that they're selling? Like, say you're putting in a subdivision for homes, say, and you have a neighborhood, you have one big piece of property, and then you separate it, so here's an acre for you, and here's an acre for you.
So it was subdivided probably several times over the course of its history. And this is to bring it all together to, and I might be mistaken on the numbers, a 301 acre singular property. And that's what the purpose of this rescission plan is.
Yes, so it's still one solid piece of property.
It's not yet, but it could very well be in the next brief period of time. Now, the urban renewal plan does call for all the property lines be taken out to be made into one large property for development.
And looking at the, like I said, the map, even on the Massachusetts, when you put it in there, the interactive map, and you can see it's one large parcel of land.
Yeah, that we might have done that a couple months ago, made it the one large property, but now it's just to get all the clutter out of the way is what the rescission plan is supposed to do.
No, I don't see, like I said, thumbing through multiple pages, I don't see one for 44 Heather's.
Well, it's 28 Heather's Path.
I saw one for 4 Heather's Path. I was just looking for another Heather's Path.
Could it be beyond the distance?
I don't know, and would be unlikely to speculate at this point without going to a GIS and taking a look at it. But as we talked about just moments ago, the remedy for someone not being notified is coming to the meeting, which is the intent of the notifications, to notify butters so they can come to the public hearings.
Well, I would like to ensure that Ms. Winslow
Yep.
We have to make it one piece.
and her address are included on any future mailings in regards to
Well, first
this.
off, we'll check to see if it's within 300 feet.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, when I first got here to Massachusetts in 1998, I thought 300 feet was kind of a small number. We did 500 feet for other things, so I had suggested at that time in Kingston that we make the abutters list 500 feet rather than 300 feet. Town council at the time recommended against it because in a court of law, those people who are abutters and abutters within 300 feet have standing in a court of law. If you make someone a abutter within 500 feet, they're under the impression they have standing in a court of law, but they likely do not.
Right.
Because that's 300 feet by the state statute. So we run those numbers in. Like I said, it's an interesting way they do it with 12 different abutters list. But
And is that from the building site, or is that from the actual property that they own?
every piece of property that they have on their plan that they're rescinding, there's an abutters list for.
Because my property line is there. So it's my property, the way the Heather's Path goes, it's a cul-de-sac. And at the very end of the cul-de-sac are 2 pieces of property. So the house that's on Montello Street, the Massinghams, they go behind my property, and then theirs ends, and then Route 44's property is
Yeah, without
my line.
looking at people's yards, I've been down the street, so, early days. But no, I don't have a particular,
Map?
map for 300 feet from
Oh,
that.
I can show you them.
All right, Ms. Murphy.
I just want to make an observation that might be helpful here. Route 44 Development owns 65 acres in Plimpton. That is not part of anything that's going to be before Carver.
Yep.
So it's very possible that Ms. Winslow abuts Route 44 Development property. That's 65 acres in Plimpton, which will not be developed in any of this process in front of the Carver boards. So I just wanted to mention
Yes,
that they
thank you.
do
I-
own property.
I do recall cutting that section off of
Right,
when we,
right. So that,
in writing somewhere?
there are plans.
we
so-
designated it as unbuildable, because it had no frontage.
Yeah. And it's in another town,
Yeah.
so it would be required, if they were ever going to develop the land in Plimpton, they would have to go to all
Right.
of the permitting boards in
Yes,
Plimpton.
and we
then
could-
you would be a direct abutter.
Your last
Yeah.
statement that they're not gonna build.
We couldn't designate
That's on camera, right?
in another town that it was non-buildable.
Right, right. So, sorry, thank you.
No, thank you. So, okay, anyways, regardless, I would like to be notified.
Yes.
I think as that, but you heard she said.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Further questions or comments? Seeing none? The chair will accept a motion to close, unless we don't have anything outstanding on this.
So, real quick question,
Mm-hmm.
getting into this whole thing, because I want to rewind back to Route 44 and Hillwood, and all the work that we did regarding that, and...
Well, this is, okay.
Okay, well, we're talking about doing a rescission plan
Yes.
for all this stuff, and it seems like we've been down this road before, because Hillwood had a plan pretty much ready to go, and we did nothing with regards to rescinding an urban renewal plan.
No, the urban renewal plan is in force for 20 years from the date of approval, which might have been 2016 or 2019. So the urban renewal plan, because the force of the government was used to acquire property is in,
I understand, I
Yeah.
understand that, but we didn't go through any type of subdivision rescission plan regarding what was going on with Hillwood.
no,
And you're
that's,
saying that this
that's
stuff
still,
was-
that's still effective.
So if I may, and I've said this before in numerous meetings, is that the urban redevelopment plan is for somebody building something on the site. This is a subdivision plan. Nothing is being built on the site.
But we're talking
Subdivision-
about
The
a
subdivision
rescission
plan
plan.
is simply showing where a road is going to be built to create lots for the subdivision.
All right, we're
There's
talking
no-
about a
there's
rescission,
no-
We're
we're
there's-
talking about a
right.
rescission plan right
Yeah.
now.
So, and that rescission plan wipes all the lots clear. It has nothing to do with the project. It has nothing to do with the plan, that the urban renewal plan does. When someone comes to the board and seeks a special permit to build, I'm just gonna call it a bunch of stuff out there, that is what triggers the urban renewal plan. Because it is a discretionary permit, the planning board gives them permission and conditions to build that. This is not a plan to build anything. This is a plan to create a road and create lots,
It's-
so someone can build
It's a
something.
rescission plan to remove the prior approved. That's what this is.
Right, but we're going through this to wipe it out in order to re-subdivide it.
Correct.
Whereas we just got through last year dealing with Hillwood, where we went through none of this, where we did all kinds of A&Rs, we combined lots, we made this one gigantic lot out of this whole place to make sure that they had everything that they needed in order to do something. And there was no mention of having to go through and rescind any type of subdivision that had been there prior, which we've been saying was there since 2016. So I'm trying to figure out what all the kerfuffle is about.
Please,
I'm happy to try
Ms.
to walk
Murphy.
you through it. So Hillwood did have a proposed development. There was, aside from Hillwood, whether Hillwood had happened or not, there was some of the lots that Route 44 development owns also straddled the property, the town boundaries, for example, with Plimpton. And so in order to do future development, whether it was Hillwood or any other buildings, it was going to have to cut the land that wasn't in Carver off, because the urban renewal plan only covers Carver.
Right, but
So
we
those,
did that.
yeah, so that all happened, okay? And that was gonna happen whether it was Hillwood or not. It's just that because there was an agreement with Hillwood, it kind of just got moved up the timeline and it happened. Hillwood had asked Route 44 development to seek the rescission plan because they wanted the blank slate, but that deal fell apart before Route 44 development got to the point of filing it. But in the meantime, because you did have a preliminary rescission plan, that was filed at the time that Hillwood was kind of still on the scene. But then once they walked away, then there was not a rush, so it took the full 7 months to come back. But when you looked at the preliminary rescission plan, it was all part of cleaning up the site in case Hillwood went forward. So it's all, I think it all does make sense if you look at the big timeline of what was happening.
Okay, so-
But all of this needs to happen, whether it's Hillwood, and now it won't be Hillwood, but any other future, whether it's a developer or even a company that just wants to come in and build their headquarters or whatever they wanted to do, all of this cleaning up the subdivisions was gonna happen regardless.
Okay. Thank you. 'cause
Okay, that makes sense.
That
Okay.
clears up a lot
Great,
because.
great.
If Hillwood was moving forward and that was going to be the next step.
Yeah.
I understand, I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah.
All right, so,
Okay.
ready to move on. I can.
Okay,
I-
because whoever moves forward has to have pretty much a
Yeah,
clean slate.
I can take a step forward now.
All right. Any further questions, comments? Questions or comments from our viewing audience? Seeing none, the chair will accept a motion to close the hearing, public hearing for the definitive subdivision rescission plan, Route 44 Development LLC, Charter 34 Park Ave, new subdivision, new road subdivision, Route 44 Development LLC, zoning highway district, commercial and green business park.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gatsky to close the public hearing,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Dion. Do we have further discussion? Seeing none? Mr. Dion.
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sodillo says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you very much. All right, the chair will accept a motion to approve the definitive subdivision rescission plan, Route 44 development, new road subdivision, zoning district highway, commercial and green business park.
I will make that said motion.
And I will second that.
Motion made by Mr. Robinson, seconded by Ms. Sordillo. Do we have further discussion amongst the board?
Just one note
Yes.
on procedure. So this is a subdivision plan, which is a simple majority vote. And because we do not have the Mullen rule in effect, if Mr. Gasky missed the last meeting and they discussed it, he's not eligible to vote.
Yes, he's not.
Our associate member votes only on special permits, so he's not voting. So this is a vote of 4. It's a simple majority, 3 of 4.
All right. Yes, because it's a public hearing.
Yeah.
Mr. Dion.
Mr. Dion says aye.
Mr. Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sodillo says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. All right. Our next order of business is the preliminary subdivision plan, Route 44 Development LLC, 34 Park Avenue, new road subdivision, Route 44 Development Zoning, District Highway, Commercial and Green Business Park. Now, I know where we left it off last time, that you were unwilling to submit further information to the board.
Yeah, I believe, so once again, Susan Murphy, Dane Torpy on behalf of Route 44 Development, just because it's a separate matter, so I'll put it on the record. I think where we left it is that it's the applicant's position that it has submitted everything that it is required by law to submit, so that no further information is needed at this time, but all required information needed in connection with the definitive plan will be filed with the definitive plan.
Thank you. And it was noted by this board that several required pieces of information according to the subdivision bylaws was not included, such things as the ANRAD, a current ANRAD, delineation of the protected areas, lack of upland wetland delineation on the lots. And those were some of the issues that were brought up because your application was incomplete, and the board needs certain information in order to make educated decisions, and without that information, we find ourselves at a loss for being able to participate in what is supposed to be a back and forth for a preliminary plan.
We
Anything-
understand that the board's rules and regulations has a list of submissions. There is case law in Massachusetts that is very clear as to what the requirements are. The town's regulations exceed what's required by law, and the case law says, because there's been cases almost identical to this, and the case law says that an applicant for a preliminary, because that's all this is only required to submit what the state law says, not anything in addition to that. And so that is what the applicant has before the board. The case law is also clear that the preliminary is really just to get some initial feedback. Whether the board approves it, denies it, approves it with conditions, even if the board rejects it, there's a case on that. It doesn't change since the preliminary was filed, it doesn't change the right of the applicant to come back with the definitive. So the applicant is hopeful that the board will act. If you approve with conditions or you deny and give all the reasons why you've denied as you're required to do by statute, that gives feedback, because when the applicant does come back with the definitive, they would like to incorporate whatever questions, comments, concerns you have. They can only do that if they get that feedback from the board. So in the spirit since 2016 of Route 44, trying to work with the town and be responsive, we're hopeful we'll either get an approval with condition or, conditions, or a denial with detailed reasons for the denial, so that the definitive plan can be as comprehensive as possible. So that's what we're hopeful for tonight.
All right, the subdivision bylaws of the town of Carver are approved at town meeting, and further
No.
approved
They don't go to town meeting.
changes to them do.
Nope, subdivision regulations are the province of the planning board. At a public hearing, advertised, no town meeting, this board makes the rules for subdivisions.
Well, they've been accepted by the Attorney General. Well,
Only zoning bylaws.
it's, what?
Only zoning bylaws. Subdivision regulations, doesn't go to the Attorney General, doesn't go to town meeting.
Well, when you applied for the URP, you also agreed to abide by not only the state laws, but the local laws, and our local laws are what our local laws are. We need that information. You are in a water protection overlay district, which weighs heavily on some of the information, and that we could participate in a discussion in regards to this. That's a major piece of what's missing. I myself am having difficulty reconciling this, because, again, this isn't a back and forth. It is not in alignment with the approved UPR, which was signed on to. And this is a modification, and it's going to require that a notice of whether it is or is not a major or minor modification, or a modification at all, has to come down from the Department of Community and Housing. The permits in regards to this property, the URP, which is all 301 acres, is based on MEPA permits. And changes such as putting in septic systems instead of wastewater treatment plant, how close you are to the protected riverfront ways or protected waterways. These are all issues that we deal with, and we can't make educated decision in regards to anything without the necessary information.
Mr. Chair.
This
I
isn't
would
the
like to
back
say-
and forth. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
If you have something new to add,
I
I will be
do.
glad to listen to, but if we've
I
already...
do, because you're stating that you don't have the information. There is an ANRAD, it's a little bit older, but all of the information from that ANRAD is on the plans. And in fact, there is a current active
I
order
will
of
stop you right
conditions
there.
pursuant to that.
that the 65-foot, the 100-foot, and the 200-foot riverfront protection areas were not on that map.
Yes, but the riverfront does not extend that far onto the property.
How would we know that? And has the property been, clearly it's under development at this particular point in time. So changes have been made
But there's a
to the
minimum,
property.
there's a minimum upland that's required per lot, and the lots that are on
Was
the
that
preliminary
identified?
plan, the lots that are identified on the preliminary plan all exceed the minimum upland.
How would we know that if that information wasn't included in the application as required?
It is all in the application.
It isn't.
It's all-
You gave the upland and lowland
fine.
areas for the entire property. We requested them for the individual lots. We requested that the protection areas as defined by the Conservation Commission be outlined in this, and that hasn't been done.
Well, Mr. Shea, then it would be appropriate then to include that as reasons for a denial or conditions of an approval. And it'll all appear on the definitive
All
plan.
right. Any further questions or comments? Anybody from the audience have questions or comments? Ms. Russell, please step forward and identify yourself.
Jean Winslow, 28 Heathers Path, Plimpton. With the changes, originally, well, back around 2016, 17, when the whole large building, warehouse was going to be built, they had discussed putting in a wastewater treatment plant. And if I'm correct thinking this, that is now, since the plan has been rescinded, correct?
Which plan?
The one we just talked about, the one you just rescinded, the subdivision plan, which was, I don't
We did-
understand the subdivision because it
We
was one
didn't,
building.
all the subdivision rescissions that we just rescinded were from roughly 1995 and prior.
Okay, so as Mr. Gasky said, which I understand your confusion with what you were stating, because none of that was talked, so if it was subdivided, which it was originally, because I know there were multiple businesses back there, then it became one. So at what point was those other subdivisions rescinded to be made into one building? And that was their most recent plan, correct?
That was their most, and I believe it's the plan on record for the urban renewal plan.
So you went from subdivided to one large building to now being re-subdivided to make multiple buildings with multiple septic systems.
Well,
Is that my understanding?
That's what's being proposed. Currently, it is just one big lot that's been taken all those individual ones. So currently, it is one big lot, and the proposal is to subdivide.
Okay, so going back to the one big building, prior to that, back in 95 or whatever,
Please,
yeah,
So there's no building.
right,
There's only dirt, only land.
I understand.
All that's being proposed is a roadway that's going to create frontage for 3 lots. One lot is going to be, and I'm just going to round the numbers off here, 1.4 acres, 4.1 acres, and 200 and X number of acres. There's no buildings. There's no septic systems. It's only a road, and it's only 3 lots. When you get into building buildings and putting uses on those properties, that is a permit that would invoke some of the requirements in the urban renewal plan depending on their threshold. At this point, the only thing that's being discussed is where is the new road going to be, where are these 3 lots going to be, and is there sufficient drainage for that roadway and for the infrastructure that goes into it? Is there a place where water can run along the side of the street and drainage and cable and electricity and all those sort of things? There are no buildings. There are only 3 lots and a roadway that's being proposed at this time. At some point in the future, they're likely to come back with buildings and all those sort of things. But at this point, there's no buildings. There are no buildings. It is 3 lots on the road. That's it.
so to your point, yes, the proposal is to subdivide that large property into 3 separate lots.
And so, as I'm going to go back to this, because I maybe I missed this somewhere, but it was subdivided. There were multiple areas with multiple businesses that were not under one,
Different owners, different, yeah.
right, different parcels of land. So it went from that to the last URP that we went through was the massive warehouse, right? So it went from multiple to one. Is that?
And that was the proposal was.
Right. So was there a rescind, did someone rescind the original plan for how
Well,
it
that
was back
wasn't,
there?
that wasn't a subdivision plan, because at that time, it was one big lot, and the infrastructure is supposed to take place until it's a shovel-ready development, and then it's supposed to be subdivided.
Okay. So moving up to the building that was going to be put in, which was the last plan, okay? Their plans were to put in a wastewater treatment because because of the sheer size of the building and all of that. I forget all the semantics and I don't have my notebooks. I have a scrapbook of this. But, so from that point, and it's my understanding that now there are problems with the EPA and that there's PFASs in the water at this point. Is that
I
correct?
believe, if I'm not mistaken, that there is current remediation plans for that property.
So I just want to be clear, and that I understand it, let's put it that way, that that's all going to be taken into consideration long before anything is even thought of, that that's going to be tested, that our wells are going to be tested, and that we're going to have, because that sits on, it's my understanding that that's the largest aquifer on the South Shore.
Right, I'm not sure if you're in the Plymouth or the Taunton aquifer, but they're both pretty much.
Yeah, and so I know, like I said, hearing, various things that have gone on, that there is a concern, and that I believe that the EPA turned things down. And I believe, because, we never even got a reason, and I may just not have seen it, why Hillwood pulled out in the first place. Is there any reason for that?
We wouldn't know.
Yeah, okay. But, so I would just like to say, before anything is taken into consideration, for them to move on with their plan, and we're not opposed to something going back there. What concerns us is the condition of the water. We all have wells, and we know that, unfortunately, with everything, they've probably, everything's gotten worse in the environment in general. But that is taken into consideration before there's any movement forward in subdividing it.
I do believe that I believe that the URP requires that remediation be completed before anything can move on. That's part of the development process, is to remove or otherwise remediate any contamination issues in regards to that project. I don't have specifics on what's going on there, but I know EPA was involved in some new remediation issue in regards to the property, and I believe there was a containment proposed where it's covered by plastic or something along those lines, and then paved over or put under a building of some sort, so that water doesn't filtrate through the contaminated earth and get into the aquifer. But again, I don't know anything for certain. This is just what I understand from watching the Conservation Commission meeting.
And then just my last thing that I wanted to point out, I'm still confused on the 65-foot versus 40-foot or 45-foot, whatever the height of the building, because I believe that was rescinded.
It was rescinded at town meeting from 65 to 40 feet, but this application was put in prior to that. So this application, if approved, would freeze or the zoning at 65
Again, it
feet.
was my understanding that something happened, that it wasn't actually approved. It went prior to that.
I don't, it hasn't been approved. It's been submitted to the board.
But
Now,
at the-
if something is submitted before a town meeting for anything, and the town meeting changes the laws, if it was submitted before the laws were changed, they're grandfathered into that.
So if it was rescinded at town meeting, so it was brought back to 40, but then their plan was in prior to that, so the town meeting, the vote doesn't count? I'm confused. Excuse my...
Something-
I think you got it.
I'm-
So technically, there's, and words, particularly these kind of words having, so rescission is not the word that you're looking for. Last year, town meeting approved a zoning change to make the building 65 feet. This year, they approved a zoning change to put it back at 40 feet. So the zoning is at 40 feet for anybody who hasn't filed a preliminary plan and is grandfathered their property. But there are no buildings at this point. Road, 3 lots. No buildings, no project, no URP.
But since this is a new plan, right, a preliminary plan, right, then therefore, they're back to square one. So it's
The
40
URP
feet.
is in effect from 20 years from the date of its approval by Department of Housing and Community Development. And I don't recall if it's 2016 or 2019, but it approved it at that point. So it is the property is under an urban renewal plan for 20 years from that point.
So potentially, they could be 65 feet again.
Potentially.
Because if memory serves me correct, they were supposed to do a balloon test, and I don't believe that that happened, or it could have happened and I just wasn't notified of it. So I just, like I said, unfortunately, the transparency and finding out, through social media, so like I said, when you're in a butter, it's kind of a struggle. When we had been heavily involved in it, so I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to, and I unfortunately didn't want to make this my life's work again. But if I have to, I will. And because unfortunately, we kind of run into a little bit of a problem being in Plimpton. We have to get Plimpton involved in it also because it's a lot to digest when things go on. And unfortunately, our votes don't count in this, so.
Well, the RDA should be reaching out to you and providing information on whatever's going on. That's also part of their job
Yeah.
as a redevelopment agency.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll tell you that there's no way for me to make an informed decision on this. So the chair will accept a motion to disapprove the preliminary subdivision plan of Route 44 development as incomplete and not aligning with the requirements of the URP. The application did not give enough information for the board to make any sort of educated decision in regards or provide any sort of meaningful feedback, in my opinion. But the chair will accept the motion to disapprove the preliminary plan for Route
Can I just make
44
sure I got that
development.
motion captured? So a motion to disapprove is incomplete by not meeting the requirements of the URP, is that what you said?
No, for not, as an, incomplete application, and it was lacking the required information necessary for this board to make informed decision or partake in any sort of meaningful discussion or feedback. And it's not in accordance with the approved URP, but the application was woefully incomplete. And so the chair will accept a motion to disapprove the preliminary subdivision plan of Route 44 development.
I'll make said motion.
Motion made by Mr. Dion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sordillo. All right.
Was any testimony taken last meeting?
Well, it's a preliminary
It's not a
plan,
public
it's
hearing.
not a hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody
But
gets.
there
Okay,
was,
no problem.
there was, some of the abutters came, and
Yeah, just didn't
I
know.
saw them talking with the developer, so maybe some of their issues were worked on at that time.
Just want to make sure that any decision that I can participate in anything.
You
problems.
can participate. So it's important that this board understands what the urban renewal is. Unlike the state zoning act and our town zoning acts, the urban renewal law is not a land use regulation statute. It authorizes a city or town to acquire property and then dispose of it in accordance with the requirements. The issues we face today with the proposed preliminary subdivision as presented is an incomplete application lacking the information necessary and required to make an informed decision or recommendations regarding the proposed project. Without the information requested, and as required by the town in both the approved preliminary subdivision application process and urban renewal plan, this board does not have the ability or an avenue under the law to decide if this is an appropriate project under the approved urban renewal plan and the requirements set forth within. Furthermore, without approval from Department of Housing and Community Development, this board is unable to make appropriate recommendation to ensure compliance with our existing zoning bylaws, wetland protection laws, or requirements provided for in the urban renewal plan to create attractive sites for development under that plan. An urban renewal plan is a blueprint for decision-making and dictates the allocation of resources and public actions in support of actual redevelopment. The plan spells out the manner and means of renewing a defined area, detailing what will happen and why changes are being proposed for parcels in the project area, and stating what is expected of its partners in the project. The use of power of governmental agencies under Mass General Law, Chapter 121B, to redevelop land has not met the required and agreed upon terms of the URP. And I'll be happy to provide this, but I will skip to some of the more important parts. Provide for public infrastructure improvements within the project area, on-site roadway, associated utilities, water service, water storage tank, wastewater treatment plants, underground electricity. And frankly, we just didn't get enough information. We need something from Department of Housing and Community Development that this is or is not a modification, major or minor, to the plan, and that it meets the expectations. The URP says the lack of a unified or integrated architectural theme or development pattern has led to economic decline of the general project area along with visual blight. The area is beyond remedy and control solely by the existing regulatory process and which cannot be dealt with effectively by the ordinary operations of private enterprise without the aid provided for in the urban renewal plan. Therefore, the redevelopment of the project area by the means set forth in this URP is necessary in order to achieve the permanent and comprehensive elimination of the existing decadent and blighted conditions. The assembled site will be subdivided into new parcels that will reflect the optimal use of the site as a whole. A big part of this is the assembly and unity and the lack of unified or integrated architectural theme. And it seems like we're going back to piece this together piece by piece. The URP may be modified at any time by the CRA following the procedures outlined in 760 CMR 12.03. Plan changes. And we haven't heard anything back from the Department of Community and Housing. We don't even know if the CRA reviewed, explored, or discussed this preliminary subdivision plan, because again, we have nothing from them. Changes that would require further traffic studies. Changes of this magnitude relating to wetland protection and wastewater discharge from the site are subject to various MEPA regulations, which have already been permitted, which is why To your question, maybe the hilltop moved ahead because the plan was designed to minimize the requirements in order for something to go forward. And this, what's being proposed is a modification to the plan. The applicant has failed to provide the required information, rendering this application incomplete. The board is compelled to reject the application for noncompliance with Section 3.2 of the Carver subdivision bylaws and deem it not submitted as outlined in Section 3.2 of our subdivision bylaws. This will allow the applicant to resubmit the application as required. This will allow the applicant to resubmit the application with the required information outlined in our bylaws. Accompanied by written approval by the CRA and the DHCD. And aside from reading Section 1203, which I referenced, the Urban Renewal Agency shall submit all proposed minor and major plan changes to the department for approval, except as specified. And then it describes what a major or minor plan is, and then it gives the exceptions. Easements for utilities, takings for the purpose of title clearing, tax foreclosures, conveying non-buildable lots of less than 5,000 feet to adjacent parcels, acquiring an interest in property made available through discontinuance of a road, or transfer of a property interest to and from another public entity. As all 301 acres of this site fall under the urban renewal plan, and extensive studies have been done, and money and time by this town and the state, I don't think it would be appropriate or ethical to approve this. So. Any further discussion amongst the board?
Sure.
Please.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
please,
after
Kevin.
you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Bott, did we receive any word from council on our ability to make a decision on this based on the information they brought forward?
Yeah,
We did, and she said if the application was incomplete and you don't feel you have the necessary information to make an informed decision.
That's what she said?
based on the information required in the subdivision regulations. And so there's nothing in the subdivision regulations that say anything about an urban renewal plan.
No,
So
but
you
it,
can require the information that's in the subdivision regulations. And as I said, this is a preliminary plan. It is essentially a discussion between the applicant and the board and the town about what they like to see and what their concerns are, so they can prepare a better plan. But I've said it numerous times, a subdivision plan is not an urban renewal plan. An urban renewal plan comes into place when they decide to build something on the site. This is one
this site
road
is,
and
this
3
site
lots.
is the urban renewal plan. This 300 acres is the urban renewal plan. Anything that takes place on this site is a project under the urban renewal plan. So regardless of whether it meets or conforms to the URP, the fact is that the application was far from complete and did not provide the required information in order for us to make an informed decision, in my opinion. But town council said, if you feel that the application is incomplete and did not provide the information required or necessary in order to make an informed decision, then you vote how you feel is appropriate.
That's what town council said.
Yeah, essentially, if it doesn't meet the requirements in your subdivision regulations, if there's something in there, then you can vote to deny it. But as we talked about before, a preliminary plan doesn't have any teeth. The only thing a preliminary plan does is a space holder for a definitive plan in a non-industrial subdivision. So when you do
I
a
would-
residential subdivision, most people go straight to a definitive because they don't need a preliminary. But for non-residential subdivisions, a preliminary plan is required. And the requirements of a preliminary plan are in our subdivision regulations.
And the purpose of a preliminary plan is to discuss before money and time is put into a definitive plan, what the issues in regards to it are. And we can't even begin to discuss that without knowing where the 65-foot, the 100-foot, the 200-foot, the requirements for a wastewater treatment plant on this site, whether this has been permitted or not, because the wastewater treatment's been permitted through MIPA, and now we're talking about a change to that. So again, we don't have, the information wasn't provided to us to be able to make these decisions is my concern. You had a question?
Not really a question, but statements and observations about some of this stuff. I find it a little bit disturbing how things have progressed with regards to this preliminary subdivision, being that everyone presenting being as combative as they were. And with that, I believe that the statements about working with the planning board going down the road with a definitive subdivision plan are disingenuous. There is expectation that any attempt that we guide or request plan changes, I believe will be met with threats of litigation based on what we're seeing right now, and that, historically, with regards to this site, there's been a lot of nefarious behavior, and that, from what I've seen so far, it seems to me like this behavior is going to continue. And with that, state laws, I just want a quick statement here, state laws are routinely confronted and challenged by local municipalities, and when they are articulate and have supportive representation, the municipalities prevail and their local laws stand. And that's all I have to say about that.
All right. Further questions, comments, or discussion amongst the board? Mr. Dion, the motion on the floor is to disapprove the preliminary subdivision plan of Route 44 development. What say ye?
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says nay.
Ellen Stella says nay.
Mr. Shea says aye.
That's all it takes, 300, or 320, say.
320, yep. All right. Our next order of business is town planner notes.
All righty. Thanks for having me back. I wasn't able to attend our last meeting because of a previous engagement. So we have on our calendar our next meeting on the 25th. And then I sent out the email to a couple of folks, but didn't hear back from everybody. So we have a training scheduled for July 27th with the Citizens Planning Training Collaborative on subdivisions and A&Rs. And that'll help a whole lot in processes like this. So on our July schedule, we got a meeting in 2 weeks. And then Thursday, the 27th, Ilana Quirk is going to be our trainer. She is an attorney, and she's also worked as a planner as well. And I specifically wanted someone who had some practical experience in dealing with subdivisions, knows the law, knows the technique and things like that. So it's going to be a really good night. When we have these things, when the trainer comes to us, we get to delve in a little bit more into some of the local questions and concerns. We'll also be inviting our neighbors, as we did the last time, although we didn't get many takers. We did the training last year, so we'll be inviting folks from Plimpton and from Rochester to come to the meeting as well, and make for a better community all around us. That's all I got.
All right. Any notes?
Yeah, I got a
Clint.
couple of PSAs real quick. So just got notice that there was a legislation that's being filed from Senator Eldridge and Representative Senna with the state regarding private wells. I would recommend that everybody go and look at the legislation and make up your mind how you feel about it, but given that 99% of Carver's on private wells, this is something that's going to affect us directly.
What's the gist of the legislation?
Working with having the DEP come up with regulations to monitor and basically put monitoring of private wells on the citizens that we will, what I gather from what I've read so far is that they're going to put requirements on homeowners to monitor their wells
Like a meter?
and report, no, not a
Oh,
meter.
height,
but,
levels?
Chemical testing. Chemical testing for different, like PFAS, E. coli, different stuff like that.
Dioxin?
Yeah.
Any suggestions on where that can be done?
You can find it from, I've been looking at it on senatoreldridge.com. That's where I got the link, what was sent to me was where that came from.
But as
So-
far as the water testing itself, do you have any suggestions as to where you would take that water sample?
John, if you want to send that to me, I'll forward it on to all the board members.
There's
Yeah, we'll do.
there's actually a list downstairs, I believe, of water sampling and testing. I believe it's outside the planning office.
I don't know.
I thought there was a list of 3, but I know there's one in Middleborough that comes
Right.
highly
I
recommended.
think Bob Bentley used to run
And
that or something.
I'm certain that the Mass DEP could probably give you a listing of the
Okay.
licensed ones.
And the other PSA that I'd like to put out is regarding another bill that's before the Senate. It has already gone through several rounds of voting. It seems to be moving forward, and that is it's HD 4410. That's something that everybody needs to take a look at very quickly and it has to do with firearm ownership and regulations.
Firearm or fire alarm?
Firearm.
Okay.
If you are a gun owner, you need to pay attention to this legislation, especially if you have some classic firearms, because and if you also are somebody who tends to carry a firearm with them, pay very, very close attention. HD 4410.
As a general rule of thumb, you should be paying close attention to everything that goes on up on the hill.
Yep.
Um,
Well, as far as these go, to me, these strike at the heart of our civil liberties. So.
All right. Anything further from the board? Congratulations to Kevin, number 10. So you got the alternate for the baseball team.
Thank you.
All right. The chair will accept a motion to approve the edited minutes from 6/13/2023.
I'll make that said motion.
Motion made by Mr. Robinson, seconded by Ms. Sordillo. Discussion?
Mr. Dion says aye.
John Gasky says aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Al Sedillo says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. The chair will now accept a motion for adjournment.
I will make said motion.
Motion made by Ms. Sordillo,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Dion. Mr. Dion.
Mr. Dion says aye.
Aye.
Kevin Robinson says aye.
Ellen Sedillo says aye.
And Mr. Shea says aye. Thank you all very much. and have a good and pleasant evening.